thank you all so much for coming to our Jurors Critique for Great Artists Wheel. For those of you that haven't met Alecia, this is Alecia Harper, and she is an art history aficionado. She teaches art history at State College of Florida, which is where we met, and she's also a DJ at Fogartyville.
So 96.5, so on Wednesday mornings. If you like psychedelic music, that's what it is.
Of course. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the award winners, and then anyone else that's also here with a work in the show, we'll try and talk about those as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alecia.
So I wanted to thank Christina and everyone at the Art Center and all of the artists for allowing me to participate and to appreciate the works that you've created. I really enjoyed looking at each and every one of them. It was quite a task. There were some 284 works across 23 different types of media. And I wanted to make sure that a lot of different types of art and works and media were represented in the show. So that you didn't feel like it was all figurative art or all landscape or all one particular style. I did want to give you, I love statistics and I love a deep dive at looking at people's choices. So I just wanted to share with you really quickly, of the 284 wonderful works, there were 140 different artists that were represented as being inspirations or great artists that were stolen from. Picasso was at the top with 14 and Rothko also 14. Monet 13, Klimt 13, and Van Gogh 13. So those were really strong. People are still getting inspiration from 19th century artists even today. So when you think about 100 to 150 years have passed, it's amazing that people can still find something new in the works from that period. I wanted to round out that list. Matisse inspired 12, Kandinsky 11, Salvador Dali 11, and I was actually surprised that wasn't higher given our proximity to so many Dali works. Pollock 8 and Cézanne 7. So this group is really influenced by the proto-moderns and the moderns, and it was a real joy to look at all of these works. So I thought I would start with this work by Robert Petrillo, which is a cyanotype. Now, this is an old photographic process. It was actually developed in 1842 for shipbuilding diagrams. They were trying to find a new way to make these diagrams easily accessible. But it's a really beautiful form that has been developed over the last 150 or so years so that you can really appreciate the depth, the tonality, the detail, the sense of atmosphere that you can achieve through cyanotype. I particularly was drawn to this work because it's somewhat serene and it gives me a sense of nostalgia without being overly sentimental. You can really find your center and find a sense of place when you're looking within this work. I mean, it took me back to North Carolina. And the artist that it is being inspired from is Michael Eastman. And Michael Eastman does series of tree cyanotypes, different types of trees with different types of leaves. So I was interested to know from this artist if they actually created a series of these, like Michael Eastman might have done. So you can see the type of paper that is used, and you really get a sense of looking through the image into the background, literally and figuratively. So a cyanotype, an unusual choice, but a very beautiful choice. Also, look at the precision that this photographer has managed to achieve in the different branches and leaves, the texture of the bark. I mean, you really get a sense of very fine detail. So if you, after we talk about it, you can move a little bit more closely, you can start to really pick out very precise tonalities and specific details.
Is that similar to an etching?
No, it's not an intaglio process. It's a photographic process that has to do with light-sensitive paper and exposures. It was originally developed to be a way to duplicate images without a camera. But now in the modern world, it's been developed to adapt to a three-part system of tinting, bleaching, and then intensifying certain parts of the image through the photographic process to achieve a cyanotype like this. And I was wondering if the artist was here so I could maybe ask questions. I love this work. Could you maybe talk a little about your process if you don't mind me putting you on the spot? You don't have to, but
Okay. But thank you for your nice compliments. That was so nice. So I guess my similarities with Michael Eastman, we both kind of started cyanotype during the pandemic. And I also do trees. I photograph trees a lot, and it seems like the cyanotype process really does go well with trees. So the process is very painstaking. I actually make a negative digitally. And then I paint, I call it the emulsion, but it's the cyanotype chemical mixture onto the paper. And then I expose it in the sun. And the exposure time varies on the UV light during the day. So I'm sorry, what was your question one more time?
I was just wondering about your process of the layering of the emulsion and how long your exposure times were, just to get such crisp detail and refined sense of atmosphere.
So I layered about 3 layers of the cyanotype chemical onto the paper. And if you look a little closely, I really wanted to do an edging here because I really am inspired by watercolorists in their edging. So I wanted to have a unique edging. Michael Eastman actually really just kind of paintbrushed his chemicals on the paper. So it's a little bit messier than mine. And I also think that Michael does a reverse. So this is a negative and mine is a positive. So I took, kind of inspiration from that. This was probably about number 40 on my, on the actual print, because they're always, the chemical is so very sensitive that and this one was so overexposed. When I put it in the bathtub of water, it was just black, and I left it in there for about 2 or 3 hours, and then finally it just kind of evolved into this, and I was so thankful and ready to be done. But it really did take me a lot to to get this border, and then the detail is all in the negative. So if I would make a print and I didn't like the contrast in this tree, I would go back in and fix it and make a new negative and then make a new print. So the process is very painstaking, and with the sun being so, it comes in, it goes out in the clouds, so the exposure times are just crazy, and sometimes magic happens, and I will shut up. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your constant effort because you did create magic here, I think, in this one. Next, we're going to walk clockwise to our left, and we're going to look at the ceramic piece by Michelle Maffenauer. So when I looked at the works for the first time, I was really struck by this piece because it reminded me of Frank Gehry architecture and deconstructionism, and the fact that one type of art is influencing another type of art, architecture influencing ceramic and ceramic influencing sculpture. And I love the really smooth white surfaces, the unexpected juxtapositions, the kind of exploding of our expectations. So when we think about a form, we're expecting things usually to go together symmetrically into a line. And so the way that this has been chamfered on the corner, the way that things are slightly irregular, it's incredibly beautiful to look at, all of the different planes. And as you walk around the piece, you see something new every time from your vantage point. So Christina was kind enough to just print architecture from Frank Gehry for me. If you're familiar, probably everyone is, with the Bilbao. You see the Guggenheim in Bilbao. You could see why I was kind of struck by that connection, because this really challenges our expectations of what sculpture should be and what ceramics should be. and it challenges our expectations of expecting symmetry and regularity and what we think should be the beautiful. So I really appreciated this piece, and I think I had a question for Michelle here, because this has amazing energy, and I like the way it reveals the forms. I just wondered if you felt comfortable maybe addressing your process, and if I put you on the spot, you don't have to
Sure,
answer, but
sure,
I'd love
yeah.
to hear what you think.
Just how I make it, is that what you want, or my thought
Your
process?
thought process.
My thought, well, I do love Frank Gehry's architecture. I absolutely love it. I was just mentioning that I actually worked at the Orr O'Keeffe Museum for 6 weeks once, which is designed by Frank Gehry. Everything was made by him, including the little art center that I worked at. So that was a wonderful experience. So I start out with a scale in mind and a certain shape that I want to repeat, which would be this right here. And I wanted it to be very minimal as far as detail goes, because I think it gives a greater sense of monumentality to it. So I tried to keep the details to a minimum and kind of clean, and all the things you said is exactly right. You hit it on the nose. It's just deconstructivism, and also it kind of refers even back to like Cubism, where you look at it and it's kind of referring to different times, not just the present time, but future and past, which is interesting. I don't know if that comes out in this piece, but.
And I will mention that when I started to try to narrow it down, I was looking for 3 things. First, how well it stuck to the great artist steal, because remember, good artists borrow, but great artists steal. And how well the artist had kind of internalized the message of different artists and represented it, and how they had listened to the past, but they're creating something that speaks to the contemporary time or speaks to the future. That's a very good point. When we think about Cezanne and the works of Cezanne, even though he's working in the paint medium, we're looking at things from different vantage points, and we're seeing front, back, and side sometimes simultaneously. And I feel like this sculptural work has a sense of monumentality, but it also speaks to that being able to see when we're breaking it apart into planes and appreciate each of those planes. So, lovely. And I will mention that, if I'm not mistaken, Frank Gehry turned 95 on Leap Day of this year. So I read that in the newspaper, if I'm not misquoting.
Right.
But,
He wouldn't have been 95 then. He would have had to have been an even number.
So thank you. And, let's see. I think we're going
Could I
to.
ask a question about the base before we move along?
The base?
Comment on the base.
Yeah, you know what? I actually brought the base and I asked Christine if I could pop it in there because I just thought it's going to get totally lost on this white pedestal.
Yeah.
So it's basically to set apart. It is a charcuterie board with the tray underneath. So if anyone finds it, they get the charcuterie board with the tray.
Now we're going to look at this piece on the north wall here. And this is by Mark Schubert. It's called Mind's Eye. It's a small acrylic on paper with a beautiful white frame. And this was inspired by Gregory Hundertwasser. Now, if you're not familiar, this is someone who grew up in Vienna during the Nazi regime and became somewhat of a political activist artist and environmental artist. But the work is really inspired by kind of like the Orphism of the later period, but the bold colors, the kind of organic line, the interest in irregularity, and also kind of the spiraling feeling of this work. It reminds you a little bit of the pattern work of Gustav Klimt, the bright colors of the Delaney's with Orphism, and it's kind of like a precursor to some of the modernism. So if you think about the inspiration for this work, this was at a time period when the modernists in Bauhaus were saying, let's eliminate all decorative quality. And this artist said, no, let's make it all about the decorative quality, that feeling of a happy utopia. One more thing about the inspirational artist, when John Lydon of the Sex Pistols wanted to create an album cover, back when there were albums and album covers, an artist who created those, I'm dating myself, for his new band called Public Image Limited, he actually commissioned this artist to create the cover, and it was called Happy Too. And I feel like everyone that looks at this it evokes an emotion of happiness because of the bright rainbow-like colors and the way that you're drawn in and out of the artwork. So I brought a work by the original artist to share with you, so you can see how the artist has kind of taken the ideas of the inspiring artist and made it really their own. So you can see that this artist internalized the lessons and then made it personal for them and a heightened sense of emotion. And I was gonna ask the artist a question. Is the artist here, any chance? Thank you. I hope that I've kind of hit the mark and I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
off base. But I wondered if you wanted to speak to your choice of color harmonies or your inspiration.
I was doing a lot of cityscapes, and I was working toward more abstraction with the building shapes, and also extending like the windows and the patterns into almost like a non-object. But I wasn't satisfied with my color choices, and I just couldn't break out of this standard looking cityscape. I ran across Hundertwasser's book at the bookstore downtown on Main Street, which I like that book. And when I saw him, it just inspired me to take up some of his forms and some of his style, and it helped me bring my thoughts to the paper. And I haven't worked on paper. I worked on canvas and wood, but the paper seemed to brighten the colors. The white from the paper seemed to come out, and I could overpaint and get a more dimension. So I enjoyed reading about him, and I enjoy talking about having visits coming to Sarasota, taking photographs. And so the mind's eye obviously is my eye observing what's happening here in town and responding to it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So it's a beautiful work, and I can see kind of the inspiration from the downtown Sarasota skyline that's growing every day. So our own little slice of utopia.
And I do make my own frames.
That's another question I was gonna ask, okay? Thank you. Let's see, we're going to next down the hall, and we're gonna look at another ceramic, so we'll all come this way. A work on a large scale by David Hamill, inspired by a Vincent van Gogh work of art, The Starry Night. Probably one of the most familiar pieces by the symbolist artist Vincent van Gogh. And I love the way that, kind of like the column of Trajan, the story just kind of folds around the corner. When I look at this, I really feel like the artist understands the symbolist movement. Van Gogh was part of the symbolist movement, looking for some type of universal, relatable truth that people can appreciate, but also it depicts the effect, not the thing. So extreme naturalism isn't the goal, it's the idea of depicting the feeling or the effect of what the thing presents, depict the effect, not the thing. Even though this artist has a very careful attention to detail and exquisite craftsmanship, and look at the colors, I wanted to show you how, in the glazes, this artist has really approximated kind of the impasto brushwork of Vincent van Gogh and just made it feel very textural and very tactile. So this is a detail of some of the brush strokes, the autographical brush strokes of Vincent van Gogh. And then if you get kind of close, not too close, use a clean wave, you can see all the discontinuous colors. So I wanted to ask the artist if you don't mind speaking a little bit about your choices of strokes and your decision-making process.
Well, like you said, I chose the strokes that were similar to his strokes in the painting, and I've been fortunate enough to see the painting. I tried to get the, like you said, the feeling of the piece as best as I could without exactly trying to duplicate it entirely, which I have in the past. I've actually made these in relief, and that just takes a very long time. And I made this piece by making a flat slab of clay, wrapping it around a cardboard tube, then I draw the image, I pull the tube, and then I push the image from the inside out. I don't attach anything, I just push it and shape it. So to get the textural feeling of it as well. So you get a piece of pottery, a sculpture.
It's beautifully formed. And also, I wanted to mention, we have on this side, we see the night dinner, which really makes it contemporary to where we live. I mean, even though we're not looking out through the window of the cafeteria in the sanatorium like Vincent van Gogh, we can appreciate the beautiful sunsets and the beautiful sky and that sense of movement in the sky here in southwestern Florida. So this really, kind of makes it feel like a connection to the present and contemporary. So it does look to the past and the work of Vincent van Gogh, but also it makes it feel like it's part of our natural lived experience as well. So thank you. Anything else you wanted to add about process? Or?
I just, illustration was my first choice at Ringling, and then I ended up merging into painting and sculpture, so I still like to utilize some of those skills and apply.
I'm very impressed that you don't have any cracking on the surface after you push out the clay.
Well, it sometimes happens, but you have to do it at certain levels. It dries at different levels, and there's, sometimes they collapse. Some of them are very sculptural, but you can't. It happens.
What clay body are you using?
A stoneware, brown stoneware, standard body.
Okay. I would like to thank you. I'd like to move on to Michael Parkinson's self-portrait from 1989, inspired by the work of Chuck Close. Now, I actually have two show and tells to go with this because I wanted you to see what Chuck Close was doing with his process for creating monumentally scaled portrait heads. Now, this is something that Chuck Close started doing in the 70s, where he would work from a Polaroid picture. That's right, shake it like a Polaroid picture. You have a small 3x4 image, and he's going to create a drawing on a large scale, and he's going to create a grid. Now, instead of saying, in my mind, I want to create a portrait and creating a portrait, instead, he's deconstructing the canvas into small squares, covering what he's not working on, and working square by square, thinking about the art just in terms of the formal elements. Which colors are combined, which colors are mixed, which colors are pure. What is the thickness of the paint? What is the sense of line or shape that needs to go into this individual square? So instead of focusing on the whole, they're focusing on one small area and the full elements. And then when it's all revealed, you can see how effective it works to create portraiture. Now, Chuck Close had many disabilities. He turned to art as a way of dealing with it. One of those disabilities was that he was face blind, meaning that he could see his wife in the morning, but the next day couldn't remember her face again. So he had a serious disability. This is part of the psychological process that Close used in order to commit things to memory. So a lot of portraiture throughout time has to do with committing people to memory and remembrance. But for him, it was actually a process to help him identify the person and to commit them to memory. So the artist Michael Parkinson decided to use the same type of system. And so I did get a chance to speak with him, and he said he did use that same process of covering and working in a small area and then revealing at the end. And I just really love the vivid, bright colors, the way he captures his personality, cigar in hand. And this is how he looked in 1989. See, this is a work by Chuck Close from his later period, where instead of using squares, he divided things into diamond shapes and would work diamond to diamond. And the closer you get, the less clarity you have, but from a distance, it looks sometimes hyper-realistic or super-realistic. Now, hyper-realism, super-realism, very popular in the 1970s, and Close, kind of dipped a toe into that arena. I did want to show you the companion piece that goes with this work. I haven't gotten it out of order here, and I one of the things that struck me is that he actually has created two works. So this was 1989, which he created in 2021, working from a photograph. This is what he created this past year, how he looks today. Same clothes, same cigar, just the effects of time that affect all of us. And I was just really struck by that. Now, this is smaller in scale, but this has that sense of monumentality that really captures what Chuck Close was trying to do, to set people in print, to make people permanent, to capture their image, but also to deconstruct our expectation of what a portrait should be. So we'll look at a lot of different portraits today, and at the end, I'm going to ask you, do each of these styles of portraiture have the same effect that the Mona Lisa had around 1503? This idea of portraiture and being at one with nature. Has portraiture changed its function over time? Because we're still commemorating the individual or the group in the portrait. So, any questions about this particular work? You guys can see why it was so difficult to make decisions, because all of these works are exceptional and there's so much that you should say about each one. If anyone has questions, we'll move down to the left and we'll look at the work by Betsy Weil. Not sure how we want to do this. So this is by Betsy Weil, and it's a large-scale mixed media on canvas. And Betsy was inspired by Egon Schiele and Gustav Klimt. When I looked at this, I thought the artist is probably also inspired by symbolist painters such as Brahms on Stuck and Bach. So if you think about some of the femme fatales of the middle 19th century, this reminded me of one of those early images of the femme fatale, the power of women. A couple of things. It's hard to know where to begin. I'm going to start with the imagery that would remind you of Art Nouveau and the Jugendstil and the work by Klimt. Because Klimt, in using these patterns, did it to intentionally cause the eye to work in a certain way, to keep the eye true, and to make you identify it as pigment on a surface, and to make you identify it also as a real human being that was existing in a believable fictive space. So Klimt was inspired by Byzantine mosaics that he had seen. He was inspired by the burgeoning Art Nouveau idea of beauty and a unified type of art that appealed to everyone because it had decorative beauty. But also you can see that there's a little bit of the symbolism present. So you have the willowy figure that's modeled in reds and teals. It's really beautiful and it works very effectively from a distance. So I'm not sure if you can see this a little bit up close, the modeling of the red and the green. And of course you have the long flowing hair, the raven, the antlers, the serpent, which is actually taken from a symbolist work by Franz von Stuck. This was the first femme fatale imagery. This is the symbolist painter Franz von Stuck. Now, show this in class. I haven't been fired yet. And I asked the students, what is she wearing? What is she wearing? Because this is a nude, and this is the reimagined nude of the Renaissance, but for the modern era, for the 19th century, what they consider the modern era. She's a little bit dangerous. Her face is cast in dark blue and green shadows. So I love the way this artist has taken that idea of the modeling of the teal blue and applied that here, and it's very effective. Also the fact that the gaze is not directly engaging, but somehow you're absorbed by this gaze. You know, it pulls you in to this space, and you get a sense of ancient mythology, mythological figures, and a figure that has monumentality and power. Women in a sphere where they can exert some type of control and power. And I think it's strikingly beautiful. Also, I want to draw your eye to the way that the garment here, which is kind of like what we imagined Cleopatra might have worn during the period when they're creating the beautiful Ka statues with the really thinly diaphanous fabric. Notice how it both conceals and reveals on the surface. In a sense, and it kind of flows into the Klimt-like patterns that also direct your eye. Also, the figure is holding an orb, or perhaps it's a ring, but this idea of the spiral was really important during the Art Nouveau period. When you look at Art Nouveau works, this idea of the spiral, the continuity of life, the creative force, and that's included here. So I was really struck by this painting. It was really different because when I'm originally looking at these on a screen and they're small, and I'm like, let me look and see what the size is. Okay, this is 5 feet tall. And then walking into the gallery and seeing it on the wall, you get the impact of the particular figure. So it's kind of like symbolism and Art Nouveau and a sense of the femme fatale all wrapped into one. And I think it's a really beautiful work. Now, the artist lists Egon Schiele probably because of the modeling of the figure and the form of the body, and also Gustav Klimt, the beautiful pattern work on the robes. Is the artist here today by any chance? Sure, I don't think I got to speak to this artist. So you really get a sense of the ethereal, mystical power, a self-assured woman who, is a mover and shaker in the natural world. But it also has that overlying effect of the macabre and supernatural from the dark tones as well. Questions? All righty. Well, I guess we'll move to this work here, inspired by the Mona Lisa and also by Kehinde Wiley. Now, I know that everybody in this room is culturally cosmopolitan and has probably seen the Mona Lisa and works by Kehinde Wiley. But just in case, just a refresher, I want to remind you of Kehinde Wiley's most famous work, which is the 2018 portrait of President Obama. So I think it's really interesting that the artist is drawn from two disparate artists that are each trying to achieve the same thing. Again, looking to the past to inform the future, listening to the past to plan the future and the way that we perceive ourselves and the power that we have in this world. And this work is by Maricel Ruiz. It's called Rebel Sun. And I was just really inspired by this, seeing it from a distance, because the effect is so different. When you think about the Mona Lisa from 1503, Da Vinci's work, fairly small in scale, a little bit smaller than this one in scale, actually. You have the same three-quarter pose. You have the same dark clothing and the lack of emphasis on the movement of the hands. So you have crossed arms, you get a feeling of self-assuredness. And even though you don't have the Mona Lisa smile, in the facial features, you have that sense of being at one with the universe. Now, in Leonardo's work, we see a narrative study of the landscape, which actually had to do with lands that were owned by the particular ruling families, showing that they were part of the status quo. Here, we have a background of a cityscape that is filtered through thick impasto paint. So you read it as more of an urban metropolitan landscape, but you still get that same sense of being at one with your environment, belonging, a sense of belonging, a sense of representation. When we think about what's taken from Kehinde Wiley, instead of having all of the language of flowers that we see, Kehinde Wiley has a beautiful Victorian language of flowers. Every flower in one of his works has some kind of direct connection to the person in the portrait. So with Obama, we have the chrysanthemum for Chicago. We have flowers from Africa, we have flowers from Hawaii. So perhaps the artist has some hidden symbols in here that if we knew more about the sitter, we might understand more deeply the context of the painting. So this is a really interesting example about context, representation, portraiture, just a sense of power and remembrance. Just a few other things I wanted to mention. If you'll look at the type of kind of sgraffito or graffiti, this decorative effect on the front, it serves both to obscure, to build up, to decorate. And I was going to ask the artist if perhaps there was some specific reason for the choice of colors. So,
Oh, hi. But
oh,
you nailed it when you were talking about how it is a person representing, being proud of, I guess, the environment they're in. So this is a person that I know personally. He's a musician, goes by the name of his son. He's out in Tel Aviv. So the background, you see the city is actually Tel Aviv. He's an American who made a journey over to Israel. And I guess he's fought his ground to stay there because they wanted to actually, send him back, deport him. But he's there, representing American, especially who have, the Zionists who have traveled over to Israel. So that's his backstory. My line work in the front comes from my own personal journey. I started as a drawing artist and have moved on to painting. I do some fiber work, but it talks about my personal anxieties. So it's a very anxious line work. Sometimes my work really speaks with, it speaks about my personal journey with my children, how I want them to grow up in a world where they can have representation of their mixed cultural family in the art world. So sometimes that can be a little nerve-wracking. So that's where all that commotion kind of like line work comes into play. But yeah.
I love this, and I love the texture. And you're from Miami?
Originally from Miami Beach, now living in Port St. Lucie.
Okay.
No.
Okay, because some of the graffiti like work reminded me of Pervishon, which if you're from Miami, you're probably familiar with the works of outsider artist Pervishon. When I worked at the Hollywood Arts and Culture Center, I was like a block away from his workshop. And so a little bit of this reminded me of Pervishon as well. So thank you so much. Does anyone else have questions or anything else?
Do you see your lines as graffiti?
Yeah, I do have some, like, I guess, urban or graffiti influences in my work, but yeah, I definitely wanted to. I actually was seeing the Mona Lisa on the news when they splashed the suit on there, so I kind of got inspired from that too. They kind of, defaced it, and it's like, well, you deface his painting, it's like kind of to play that game. So that's why I chose those lines.
Wonderful, thank you. And that's acrylic on canvas. Beautiful.
We work with a lot of layers. Yeah, it's part of my nervous way of working.
Well, you really capture a sense of atmosphere, and there's also that kind of sense of removal, revealing and concealing and removing and taking away that which doesn't belong. And in a sense, that's the work of the artist to add what needs to be there for the essence of the painting or the idea, and then to make sure that you remove what doesn't need to be there at the end, so that the truth of the message is revealed. Thank you. Let's see, we have one more in this corner. And this is a work by Jim Stewart. It's called Owners of the Moon Factory from 2014. And this one is India ink on paper. And it was inspired by Lionel Feininger. If you're not familiar with Feininger, he was a German expressionist. So he was one of the first people to really push towards non-objective art and abstracted art, or more highly abstracted art. When you think about art in the early 1910s, which is over 100 years ago now, you think about the Fauves and their liberating color, and you think about the Cubists that are going to liberate your sense of space and three-dimensionality. And when you think about the German expressionists, they're kind of starting to move away and liberate the subject towards a greater abstraction. So when I look at this work, of course, because my brain is hardwired to always see pattern and to give meaning, because all of us from birth, that's how we create meaning. We take in sensory information and we look for a pattern. I'm wondering if the Moon Factory is more metaphorical and this is a non-objective work. I was going to ask.
He's not here.
She's not here today. Okay. But I was really struck by the rainbow colors and by the precision and by the choice to use India inks on paper, because it's really created from kind of semi-abstract lines, shapes, and by the overlapping of colors, we sometimes get a sense of three-dimensionality and form. But if you'll notice very carefully, they're little figures right here. They give us a sense of scale. So where we feel like this is probably a small image, once we realize human scale, it almost gives us a sense of like a color field painting, where where we are in the enormity of the universe. And this is expanding in a large scale all around us. So I would be interested to know if there's some type of assigned meaning. I'd also like to know where he started working. Did he start with the verticals? Did he start with the points? What was the center? Where did he find the 0 point for creative expression in this work? So inspired by Lionel Feininger, a work by Jim Stewart. Okay, how are we going to do this? Because now I'm going to go to this wall and we're going to look at Gene Shirkoff's Intrusive Thoughts. I'm not sure everyone will be able to see. Sorry, I'm going to block you off for just a minute. So I was really struck by this because it was inspired by two artists. The seascape, which is very soft and beautiful, and you feel like rain is dappling on the wind-blown waves, is taken from a work by a Russian romanticist that's working in the late 19th century. But juxtaposed across this very naturalistic depiction of a seascape is the large black sun. Now, this reminds me a little bit of Kazimir Malevich and the Russian suprematists that are working around 1915. Let's see if I have a larger picture. Malevich created, which some said was the first non-objective painting. If you look in a lot of the art history books, it will tell you that this is the first non-objective painting of 1915. I'll let you in on a secret, it was not. It was two female artists, one of which was Hilda Achmann, and the other whose name escapes me at the moment. But this is the first one that's going to make its way into the textbooks. This idea of reducing art to its very essentials. So it is pigment and it is shape. It is nothing else. It is the center of creativity. So this work asks the same question. Where do we begin? Do we begin with the landscape? And are we hiding the landscape? I mean, if this was a work by Rene Magritte, I would say, what's behind the black circle? Nothing but canvas. But here we have a black ball that is radiating a pattern, a grid-like pattern that's blending into the atmosphere. And I would love to know the technique and specifics behind that. But we have a sense of concealing and revealing and draw attention to the center of the creativity of the artist. And I had a quote from Kazimir Malevich. It says, "In art, we want a departure from the world of objects so that we can go beyond abstraction." I think this is a really brainy piece. It's really cerebral, this idea of taking this beautiful seascape and then obliterating it. And when we think about obliteration too, we usually think about Yayoi Kusama and how she obliterates with all of the polka dots. And this is kind of doing the same thing, but on a grander scale, this black sun. And there's no wrong way of trying to interpret this. I would love to ask the artist, what was the interpretation? But I feel like there is no one way that we can appreciate this painting. There's multiple ways and multiple viewpoints. So Kazimir Malevich inspired work, and it's called Intrusive Thoughts. So I was wondering if the artist was here.
Don't believe he's here
Okay,
today.
already. So that covers all 9 of the works that received either awards, merit awards, or honorable mentions. But if anyone is here who has a work that they'd like to discuss, I'm happy to maybe give you some comments or just hear what you have to say. I would love to hear what the artist has to say, because to me, what I say is less important than what the artist is bringing to bear, because it's the artist that's giving us the creativity and that's pushing us into the modern world to think of new and creative ways to make us think about the world that we live in through artistic means.
Well, we definitely have a number of artists here. I don't want to call them out by name, but
Okay. I'll say it this way. Is there anyone that has a work on this side of the gallery that would like to? Okay.
Stop.
Okay.
well, I know Dee wanted to talk about her piece, which is right over here.
Okay.
It's the Keith Harry Ross.
Oh,
My
okay.
first comments on it, but we got it.
Can we just give that this minute, let's see if I can see it? So this work is an ode to Keith Haring. Those of you, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Keith Haring's work, where he eliminates and stylizes, but he's also kind of a neo-Dadaist artist because his works bring a sense of joy and creativity. Happy people that are experiencing human activity, dancing, singing, animals, and there's kind of a joy in being to the works of Keith Haring. Now, usually when we think about a Haring work, we're thinking about some type of painted imagery. So I love that this artist was inspired by one medium and created something in a different medium. Would you like to add anything about the process or the decisions? I mean, the Scrabble tiles or the
Well, one of his phrases that I love the most is art is for everyone. And that was sort of the way he went about creating his work and making it available to people. Taking the two-dimensional and putting it into a three-dimensional form was really challenging. It looks like a really simple piece, but it was actually really challenging to get the wire to stay straight in the kiln and all of that sort of thing. But no, it was fun to make. I was just pleased that you put it in the show and wanted to know what you thought about the translation into 3D. So
I'm really pleased to see this, and it's interesting too because it just brings a sense of joy, and I think that's what Haring was trying to do. I mean, he had a relatively short artistic life, very short-lived experience, but the works resonate today, probably because of their graphic quality. They're very bold, they're really happy. You get a sense of movement from these works. So thank you for sharing. I saw two other hands go up on this side, so I think we're gonna look at the corner. We can. And I love that you look at your work of art. This is Carolyn's work inspired by Gustav Klimt, and we can see some of that same interest in pattern here that helps to direct the eye. It has a very decorative effect, multiple types of layering. It's called In the Pink Tube, and it's mixed media, acrylic and spray paint. When I looked at this, I really felt that sense of surrealist autographic line. You know, when you think about when you're starting to create and you don't want to have a preconceived idea, so you're kind of letting creativity flow through you to create some beginning image. That was what I felt when I looked at the black charcoal line. That was actually what Vasily Kandinsky would do. He would listen to music. If you think about the types of music that he's listening to in that time period, and he would listen to the rhythms and he would close his eyes and he would start to use the charcoal to create something that was inspired by music. So you got that rhythm. So art for him began with music. So I was asking earlier, do you listen to music when you create?
I do listen to music sometimes, but I really do get in a different zone that I'm just sort of not unconscious, but I'm not conscious in a lot of things, and I'm putting different layers, and I use a lot of spray paint actually, and just covering them up and revealing and concealing.
So, you know, I look and I'm kind of like moving through and I'm seeing the unexpected pattern of circles. It's kind of hidden by a wash. And every time I look, I see more details that are kind of hidden with the translucent paint and then become revealed. It's a really beautiful work. It feels like a pathway or a journey. This also reminded me a little bit, and I know this is going to sound way off base, but when we think about Aboriginal artwork in the dreaming, to me, this had the same quality as a work of the dreaming, something that connects us in a way that we can't explain as something that is beyond the real. And I felt like that was captured in this work as well. Thank you. Thank you. I saw one more hand, or someone that was elected.
The office dog.
Oh, I like this. The heart for the whole. I mean, when we think about a lot of 19th century painting, and I know I've been talking about that a lot, often the symbolists wouldn't show you the thing. They would show you the effect of the thing. So here we clearly know this person is a dog lover because here's the bone in the mat, even though we never see the dog. I love the use of color because it captures some of the intense greens and the color combinations that Harper would have used. Trying to think of one of the works. Woman in the Sunlight, I think is one, but that's golds instead of greens. Where he's
My favorite is Sunlight in an Empty Room, where there's
yes,
almost nothing
yes, yes.
except light.
So you get these broad planes of flat color, but the color creates the light. And that's what's happening here. I mean, you read this as a believable fictive space, and if I go around this corner, there's probably going to be a back door and there's going to be a dog sitting there because the color creates the light effects that are flowing through. So the source of light, while it's hidden, much like a Vermeer painting, it's hidden into the left. It's coming through. And so this painting kind of gives you a sense of expectation. Now, like in his next painting, I want to see the ears of the dog. I want to see what's going on. But it captures what Harper was trying to do with light and color and cropping as well. Because if you think about a lot of Harper's works, you're not looking at something straight on. You're looking at something that is askew or askance to give you a very particular vantage point. And that's what we've done here.
I like that he edits out everything that isn't necessary.
Yes.
People say it's loneliness. I just see it as extreme editing.
I need to hire you for my next.
So I edited out the dog.
It's everything that is essential. And that's another thing that's going to happen in the 20th century. We saw this building up of illusionistic art in the 19th century. Everything had to do with greater naturalism and greater tropical effect. And then when we get to the Impressionists, they're like, hold on a minute, it's not about illusionism. Maybe that's not the purpose and function of painting. Maybe it's how we see. But then when we get into the 20th century, we start to see artists saying, what can we take away from art to get to the basic idea of art? What can we remove? What can we take away so that we're getting to just enough information that it becomes not the artist that's creating the work, but it becomes the spectator. So when you are looking at the artwork, it doesn't really fully form until you view it and you think about it. So it kind of shifts, 20th century art shifts from product to the process and the eye and the mind of the beholder and eliminating what doesn't need to be there so that you still think about it as art. And all of that is great until the 1980s when suddenly everybody's like, oh, let's bring more is more back with postmodernism. So thank you. Any other comments?
No, I just had fun doing it. It's not anything serious.
I love the color combinations. Okay. Shall we move to the last wall? Is there anyone that has a work on the last wall?
This wall.
You're on the felting, right? Okay. So this is Mary Dicey's Fuzzily Kandinsky. So in Kandinsky's later period, in his old age style, he moved away from all of this free autographical line and splatters and primary colors and different intensities towards a perfect circle, the eternal circle, and orbs in space, and alternating orbs on the background of white, orbs on the background of black, and kind of the intensity of the effect and non-objective art. And I love how this captured that idea of color combinations on the white background, the repetition of form. Now this is needle felting on canvas. So this is a multi-layered process. Mary, for people that aren't familiar, do you mind telling me about the process?
So this year I really, it's been like, I've done a lot of felting, just working with felting, knitting things and felting. Like I made a whole bunch of sea creature ornaments for a Christmas tree that were all felted. So I've just been experimenting with that, and I really wanted to make a canvas and then needle felt on top of it. So I knit the canvas and then felted it and then did the needle felting on top of it.
Again, it's interesting. I think I've gravitated towards a lot of works that have spirals. So there must be something in my lizard brain that loves the spiral. But the color combinations too reminded me a little bit of some of the Bauhaus aesthetic and also the work of the famous art theorist Joseph Albers. You're probably familiar with his concentric squares, homage to the square. And for me, this is Mary's homage to the circle. You know, the color combinations that make you feel the colors in a different way just by using the same pink, but placing it next to a different color, you feel a different intensity. So we could teach an entire class on color theory right here. But it's beautiful, non-objective art and has a lovely decorative effect. I mean, this is beautiful work and it's on small scales. So the process too. You think it's interesting to see everyone's different approach to process. Now, I'm the person that's like, quick, get it done. And so my work doesn't have precision. And to see all of you that have these labor-intensive processes that you really enjoy and love, and you can really see the care that you put into it from the works that are on display. I really appreciate that, and I envy you for that ability and for that love that comes through. So another beautiful work. Alrighty, how about anyone else on this wall? The next area. Okay, well, we'll come back over to this is the anti-wild. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so probably the youngest artist represented. Our artist Elaine is 15. So this is a really amazing art for a young artist. Wait to see what you do next. I know. I love this take and interpretation of American Gothic because as we move into the cyber age, now we're literally becoming cyborgs on the farmstead. I mean, what is our future looking like when we talk about AI and the potentialities of things being mechanized? I mean, we're probably having the same anxiety that the people in 1780 had when they had the first industrial revolution. It's like life is going to change so rapidly. And I think this kind of encompasses that. But I would love to ask everybody to move in a little closer because this is colored pencil and you can really see some really careful shading and modeling work. So you really get a sense of three-dimensionality in the forms, a careful attention to the colors so that you really get that sense of kind of not a monochromatic feel, but very pale colors that are evocative of a clear descriptive light falling on the surface. And when you look at the faces, you can see the resemblance to the original American Gothic. So we're looking at the stick style farmhouse and the couple with the pitchfork. Would you like to say anything about your work?
Yeah, I actually put some meanings in here. It'll take like really long to describe them all, but other than like the futuristic feel of it, I thought that the original artist of the piece could have put a little detail in it that would have been really fun. The pitchfork, like the handle, I made it match the dress of the woman here. Because I feel like even though we've moved on to an age where we're getting into like AI robots and stuff, well, women still don't have the rights that they need. And yeah, pretty much. And also, I just put little like differences in the piece. And the name of the piece is History Repeats. I feel like history repeats, but also there's things that change that will never go back. So I decided to, like some of the colors are different. I removed the trees in the background and I put city instead. You can see here it's kind of light, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
It feels like, this was painted before the Great Depression. He feels then all the stock markets goes up crazy. Right now, the AI, almost same thing.
Yeah.
It's craziness. That's why they call it history repeats, right? So it's different things, right? So that kind of repeat the history.
Are there structures of the faces taken from like video games or characters that you've seen?
I had just like a couple of references and I saw like the patterns that were most used and I just kind of like freehanded it because usually in my pieces I don't go in with like a plan, like a vague plan, but usually I just like put it down and see what sticks and what doesn't just disappears.
It's really fantastic.
Yeah.
First time she tried that. It's the first time. Yeah.
Wow. We look forward to see what's next. Thank you. Anyone else have a work on the side?
I'm the Matisse knockoff right there.
Oh, okay. There?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you put on canvas, it really gives you that sense of depth and effect that Matisse is known for, especially in his middle period before he turned to collage and cutouts, where you get a lot of intense colors and unexpected color combinations. I love how you've kind of taken the aqua, which kind of fades into a Carolina blue, and juxtaposed that with a deep blood red with highlights of some lavender that when you get up closer, you can kind of see with differences in colors. I like that you took a work, I think the one you're referring to is the woman reclining in the chair.
Yes.
And you've contemporized it. You've made it present day clothing, present day sneakers, attention to detail like the bracelet on the arm and a happy expression. It's kind of like you have internalized Matisse and you created something that has a lot of visual impact on the surface. Would you like to say something about your process or your color choices or?
I've always thought Matisse tried to just capture like just a regular casual moment in time. And the piece that this is stolen from is odalisque in red trousers. And I looked up odalisque and it means concubine. And I did not want to call myself that. But in the original, she's very relaxed and she's just kind of almost like having a leisurely conversation with Matisse. And my girlfriend and I had gone out to lunch and a couple of bottles of wine later. We were very relaxed and we were goofing around and she says, "Oh, you look like a Matisse painting." And so then I came home and opened up my email and there was a call to artists and I thought, well, there you go. That and it's a big departure from what I normally do because I tend to do more kind of soul vision, spiritual type of things. So I just wanted to kind of like duplicate his pattern technique and his bright use of color. So, and this is only the second show I've been entered and I've only been painting about a year. So.
Wow, okay. I love the color choices. I love the juxtapositions. I love that you chose this particular shade of blue, which is not quite a periwinkle, a little bit more towards the cobalt, because Matisse's famous painting, The Red Studio, was originally commissioned to be in this color. So that was a favorite color. However, we know that the Red Studio turned into a red studio and used this color as the highlights, but here you can really see the effect. Well, I'm not sure if the music are ushering me off the Oscar stage. So thank you. Any questions about this work?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there might be.
I just have
I'm
one,
sorry.
sorry. I'm the.
I have these too. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So this is Megan Little's Lunch with Andy and Jean-Michel Basquiat, stoneware glaze and underglaze here. I love how you've taken the iconography of Basquiat and put it on the tomato soup can. So you combined both of the artists. So you're taking something that's mass produced, mass consumed and everyday that everybody recognizes, an icon of American capitalism, and you put it on a pedestal and you made it fine art. Would you like to tell us about your process?
Yeah, there's nothing really super special. It's stoneware and then it's just low fire multiple times. So yeah, so it's best and then painted and then best and then painted and then glazed.
And I invite everybody to walk around because you can see all of the kind of hieroglyphic writing that had specific meanings, especially for Basquiat when you see the image with the crown. when you see the plus marks and when you see the astrology symbols that you would see in one of the works by Basquiat. So, thank you. And this was lovely because another neo-Dadaist piece, that brings a sense of surprise, and it also brings a sense of humor back to art. We can find beauty in the everyday, and we can also find humor in art in the everyday. So thank you.
And then just this one right here.
Okay, so Patricia's out of Africa. So this was fascinating because it's inspired by Makande masks from Africa. So we're looking at cultures other than the standard European or Western tradition for the inspiration here, much like Pablo Picasso did after 1907 when he saw the first African masks in Paris, and how that's going to inspire some of the great works in the early 20th century. So this is paper mache with some recycled cardboard. I believe these are wooden forms.
They're beads.
And so tell us a little bit about your choices. And
I'm really drawn to, I guess, the pre-modern arts, African, the pre-Columbian, and so forth. And because to me, when I look at them, they feel really contemporary to me. They look like people I know, and I sort of think I can tell what they're thinking when I look at them. I don't know what else to say. I don't usually, when I start a piece, I don't really know what it's going to turn out to be until I'm about halfway through.
So you are an animist sculptor because you're allowing the spirit of the material to tell you and to guide you into the final creation, which is interesting because many of the sub-Saharan African masks that we see up until the 19th century were from animist cultures, kinship-based societies, where they believed there was a spirit that resided in the materials of the works that were created. And I also like that the mouth is slightly open. So it's kind of allowing that spirit of that work of art to speak to us if we listen closely and with you. So thank you. I love having three-dimensional works that have so much texture and so much depth and such a careful thought process to the layering. Any questions for the artist?
I have one. What is the top hat part made out of? Is that paper, and then are they ribbons woven into it or paper woven into it?
Well, the material is called shredded cardboard. And it's actually a recycling process. They feed cardboard boxes through a machine that cuts all those slits in it. And when I looked at it, it looked like it just wanted to have something woven through it. It seemed kind of obvious. So I started playing around with it and doing that. And yeah, there's some ribbon, some twine, paper twine. There's different materials woven through. The yellow is the same material, just woven, a strip of it turned sideways and woven through.
So, and it looks like maybe some raffia.
Yeah, there's some raffia, some string.
And the face? The face?
Well, the face is paper mache.
Oh. I would have thought it was clay.
I just wanted you to talk about it.
So it says also inspired by kente cloth from Mozambique and Ghana. So when we think about patterns, often in American culture, we don't think about patterns carrying any type of cultural information. But often with kente cloth, colors have family ties. Some colors are symbolic. There's a strong practice of color symbolism and combinations. It's kind of like when we think about the ancient Inca and the patterns that they used in their woven materials meant that you could identify a family member from a distance. So you could identify the colors. I don't know if that is the case with this particular, but the color choices and the patterns are really, really interesting and add another layer to the work of art. I don't want to miss anybody. Anyone else? Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.